is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
Hello and welcome into another Fremont Pod. I am John Kurtz, joined by Derek Young and Cole Manbeck, and we are here today to talk a little football. Yes, basketball has dominated a lot of our headspace recently, but the football season is just around the corner. Big 12 Media Days just around the corner in Arlington. We got the All-Big 12 preseason football team, and we have a lot of recruiting news to keep track of as well. So we will react to it all here on this pod, which as always is brought to you by our friends at Holiday Distillery. If you are into vodka, they've got 360 vodka. If you are into bourbon, they've got the Ben Holiday Bottled in Bond Bourbon. Either one a great choice for your lake parties, if you're heading out to the pool this summer, and even if you're thinking about stocking up early for your tailgates coming up this football season or basketball, whatever it may be, whatever the occasion, Holiday Distillery, great way to go. They are K-State folks that support our pod, so please support them and get your Ben Holiday Bottled in Bond Bourbon or your 360 vodka. There have been three major prospects that we've been keeping tabs on here recently in the recruiting world for K-State football. That would be Caden Massey, who did commit. K-State landed him over Oklahoma, Nebraska, Ole Miss, among others. And then we are waiting on that Boganowski-Bricks combination, two high-level prospects, one a national-level prospect, the other one the number one in the state of Kansas. And it's a pretty exciting time right now, DY, for K-State recruiting with some really – you're being mentioned with some really high-level guys and what's going to be a pretty small class for K-State. They've really concentrated a lot of their efforts here on guys that are pretty high up a lot of teams' boards. And so far, 1 out of 3 is committed.
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of, by their standards, not relative really to like the Georgia of the world. Kansas State's been kind of big fish seeking, and just in general in the last 6 months. Just think about the way that they finished the last class too, right? With Will Lee, Rex Van Wy, Asa Newsome, Trey Spivey. They got Avery Johnson over the summer, Dylan Edwards at one point. So, I mean, this is a program that's starting to regularly recruit for prospects that have at least 10 offers. I remember at the time, I think we just touched on it a little bit when Kyle Rakers, the Des Moines offensive lineman, committed, and you made a great point in that it just seemed kind of ho-hum that Kansas State landed Kyle Rakers, but you look up and he had 11 Power 5 offers. It's kind of the same thing here with Caden Massey, the offensive lineman at Linden High, 8-man football star that has committed to Kansas State as well. Because if this was last year or 2 years ago, and this is not trying to offend anyone, but we'd be doing a separate show, probably pre-recorded or did it soon after, reacting to Caden Massey committing to Kansas State. I mean, this was a legitimate recruiting win over Oklahoma, Nebraska, and Ole Miss. Think about if I had said that even last year before they landed like Avery Johnson and Dylan Edwards, or the year before. I mean, it's just not what this program was accustomed to doing, but now it's become almost standard or so normal and accepted, it's no longer a big enough deal for us to do like a pre-recorded show on it. So I think that shows just the recruiting profile and how it has changed for the better for Kansas State. So in terms of just prestige and perception, I think that's the angle that I would take when it comes to landing Caden Massey, because this probably has not gotten enough appreciation for what it was.
Cole, no thoughts on Caden Massey?
I mean, I talked about Caden Massey a lot. That's my fault. I mean, obviously a huge recruiting win, and obviously beating out Oklahoma once again, and DY just alluded to it. I mean, you look at some of the big fish K-State's been beating on the recruiting trail over the years. I've been pulling together a chart to really examine it, looking at the 2023 recruiting class and then currently at the 2024 recruiting class. But you beat out Nebraska and Oklahoma once again. And if you look at the 23 class, you beat out Nebraska and Oklahoma several times. I mean, Jordan Allen, Oklahoma coveted really bad. Oklahoma wanted Avery Johnson. Then they got Jackson Arnold, the Oklahoma quarterback that committed there. In that class, they obviously wanted Dylan Edwards. K-State had landed Dylan Edwards, and then he decommitted multiple times. But K-State has gone up against OU several times. They're going to go up against them here on Bricks and Boganowski as well, and we'll see if they can win those recruiting battles. But just beating those types of profiles of schools out to get a guy like Caden Massey, who is really blown up, like we've talked about before, at the camps this offseason and continues to grow in size and really show his athleticism. You can't coach size. You can't coach length. he's got all of the prototypical things that you really want in a really good offensive tackle. And so if he can really develop, over the next couple of years, he could be a, first round type offensive tackle taken, as long as Connor Riley can get him to that level, because the size and length is everything you want right there in your prototypical tackle. And it's just going to take some time for him to develop, just because he's played 8-man football here at Linden. It's not a knock on 8-man, but it's a little different animal coming into the Big 12. So really excited that they landed a guy of his stature. Obviously, that's a huge recruiting win. And now we see if they can land a couple more big-time guys. DY, John, I'll steal your job. DY, what do you if I were to put a gun to your head, do you think K-State, what are the percentage chances K-State gets at least one of two between Boganowski and Bricks?
Well, set the table for us, too, on those guys. For those that don't follow this as closely as everybody, the significance of those two, where they're at, and why it's such a big deal that we're here talking about them. Uh-oh. DY's muted. DY's muted.
My bad. I turned on the Reds game, so I was like, I wanted to make sure that was muted before I got here, so forgot I muted myself. But great Bricks. You're talking about a 4-star offensive lineman from the state of Iowa, top 100 prospect. In terms of the air around him as a prospect, this is Avery Johnson territory. Like, it would be that significant. You're probably going head-to-head here with Nebraska. I think Oklahoma, Notre Dame. Who else? I forget who else was in it, but at the end. But I think those have kind of been fading. So I think it's K-State or Nebraska for him. Michael Boganowski. You're talking about the potential. This, also depends on which site you're looking at, but the potential to land the top player in the state for 2 consecutive cycles, when that was really something that slipped through the fingers for Kansas State for a number of years. The number one player in Kansas often left the state. Now, I said it depends on what side would you look at, because it's kind of weird, right? So the On3 industry ranking, which takes a combination of all 4 networks into account when assembling a ranking, has Michael Boganowski number 1. On3 itself has Kansas State commit Gus Hawkins, now the number 1 player in the state, the offensive tackle from Mill Valley. 247 now has Caden Massey, Kansas State's other offensive line commit, as the number 1 player in the state. So everything is kind of in flux here when it comes to in-state rankings. It's a pretty tight battle between those 3, I would say, even though I probably have it a different way. I probably have Boganowski number 1 as well. So, but when you put it that way, then if you have 3 different number 1s in the state, Kansas State has the potential to land all 3.
So with Boganowski, you're looking at a K-State Oklahoma battle predominantly, and with Bricks, you're looking at K-State, Nebraska, maybe Oklahoma still in the picture there. I mean, there was a future cast for him to 3 different spots on 3 different sites at one point.
At one point, yeah, and it still might be that way. I haven't really felt the Sooners heavily involved in on the Brick stuff. Now, we just talked about, basketball stuff not long ago and how that stuff can quickly change. With NIL, recruitments just aren't as static as they once were. They change often. But at the time that we're recording this, on a Wednesday evening, I really don't feel like OU is – this is a funny thing. Now, I don't think Kansas is going to land Michael Boganowski, but I think Kansas is more involved for Michael Boganowski than Oklahoma is for Grant Briggs.
Okay. Well, that's news to me. That hadn't been said to me at all here.
Yeah. Now I don't think – I would give Kansas a less than 10% chance to land Michael Boganowski. I'm not saying – but – he's all of a sudden, they're in the discussion point again. I don't think they're landing him, and it probably has something to do caught up in the momentum that the Jayhawks are recruiting with right now. I would still be absolutely stunned if he picked Kansas, but I know Kansas State is, understands what's going on over there as well.
We didn't tell you, John, because we thought you might panic and overreact to that thought. So we didn't
I can see him inner screaming just by
no, not at all. But I was fielding text messages earlier today from a certain Kansas media member saying
they're
same
getting their
thing.
hopes up too much. Yeah. But they're not completely out. They're more alive than what I think Oklahoma is for Bricks at this point.
Okay, which one is would you perceive to be the bigger deal? And I know that's a question. up for interpretation. And actually, DY, I'll give you a second to think about it, because I've got to tell you about this glorious shirt that I'm wearing from Home Field. Copper Bowl champion shirt from 1993. Home Field's bringing it back. They love the vintage sort of style, the vintage college sportswear. They've got an awesome selection of K-State stuff. Most of the K-State gear that you'll see me wearing around at Bill Snyder Family Stadium or Bramlage Coliseum comes from Home Field. Home Field Apparel, definitely the way to go for pretty much anybody in college sports now. So even if you want to branch out beyond just your K-State gear, they've got 150 plus teams there. Make sure that you go check it out, homefieldapparel.com, to get involved there and look at the K-State gear. And hey, if you just look around a K-State game these days, you're going to see a ton of it. Feels great, really awesome material. It's super comfortable. I love the sizing on this one too, that I just got my last shipment here. Literally this past week, I just got a shipment of everything here. So I am looking forward to rocking these this fall, and this winter you should too. Make sure you get your Home Field Apparel Cats gear. And on the other side, we will get that answer from DY on which of Boganowski or Bricks would be the bigger deal for K-State to land.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network. Entertain, educate, inform. KC Sports Network.
Okay, you've had time to think, Derek. You've had time to ponder this. You can answer it any way that you want and interpret whichever way that you want, like the bigger, quote unquote, get out of the two. What are you thinking?
I'll provide the arguments for both, and then I'll take my pick for Michael Boganowski. It's just landing the top player in the state for the second consecutive year, and probably doing so in the face of Kansas, elevating their recruiting profile and improving as a program. So I think when you put those two things together, I think that really highlights just how significant that is. Kansas is improving, but yet Kansas State's improving so much now too that they're consistently winning for the top player in the state. And the top player in the state in Kansas, not a talent-rich state by any means, but still a significant and really good prospect that typically has, strong college career, sometimes an NFL career. So that's no small thing. I mean, last year it was Avery Johnson. For Grant Bricks, just think about the type of recruit he is. I mean, it's Avery Johnson territory in terms of ranking, and that's across all four networks. So you're talking about a guy that you're landing a top 100 player 2 years in a row. Or even if you count Asa Newsom and a few others, like a few, 3-4 top 300 players across 2 years, wouldn't be a big deal for some programs that are used to getting 4- and 5-star recruits and littering it in their class. That's a significant deal for Kansas State because for a long time they were in the cellar, not cellar of the actual football games being played, but when it comes to recruiting, taking some of the under the radar gems and turning them into real football players was the way that they had to strike. Now you're seeing a combination of the two. You're going out and landing an Avery Johnson, but you're also developing a Felix Anudike Uzama, a good blend of the two. I would pick Michael Boganowski though, because I think Kansas State's avenue to really good recruiting classes is to secure and land the best local talent, and he does that.
Yeah, I lean toward it. You're not asking me, John, but I lean toward Boganowski as well, just because of the reasons that DY outlined. And you pretty much secure really top 3 of the top 4, 3 of the top 5 players in the state, including the top 1. And I know there's a lot of variety in the top ranked players in the state. John Price as well from Blue Valley, that's committed to Kansas State, is also up there in different recruiting services. One recruiting service has John Price, running back, as the number 3 player in the state of Kansas. You mentioned Gus Hawkins. You mentioned Caden Massey, and then you could get Boganowski potentially as well. So you lock down the state. I think that's meaningful. And you lock down a kid that has offers from Michigan, Florida State, Oklahoma, all of those high-profile schools, and beat out them. I think that would be certainly a significant factor as well, because it's not just some ho-hum top of this state of Kansas type recruit. I mean, this guy has offers from all over, and he's taken official visits to several of those places that really do indeed want him. You could beat out a guy like Brent Venables, who's a great defensive mind and linebackers coach, to land a guy like Boganowski. I think that's huge. And I think the other factor in this, guys, is K-State's already got 4 offensive line commits in the 2024 class, and they've done pretty darn well up front. I think most fans already have a lot of faith in Connor Riley as an offensive line coach. And the guys that they've landed, I think, are really solid already. And Gus Hawkins and potentially Caden Massey could be offensive tackle type guys in this class. So I think you can make it work with just 4 guys in this recruiting class on the offensive line that they've already gotten. Grant Bricks would obviously be the cherry on top, and would really love to land him, obviously being a top 100 guy and be a top 5 all-time K-State commit in program history since these things started to be tracked in the early 2000s. So by all means, give us Bricks as well. But I think Boganowski is probably the bigger land at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo all those thoughts. I was going to make the point about the offensive line. Like, they've already put together a really nice offensive line class. So I'll take the upside that Boganowski would give you, and obviously the significance of continuing to dominate in state there. But before we leave football recruiting, I mean, is there anything else that we're missing here, DY, that's significant as of right now?
No, just you look up at the ranking, you see 60. Don't freak out about it. They only have 7 commits. They're really zeroing in on 2 remaining guys here in the month of July. They're like, oh, panicking. They're like, are we coming up short here? What's going on? No, I mean, and speaking to a source, and you have to take this for what it's worth, because it is July and things can change, especially when it comes to roster composition. You don't know who's going to return and who isn't, because you don't know who's going to leave your program after the year and enter the transfer portal. You don't know who's going to leave your program because they're going to the NFL. You don't know who's going to stay in your program because they're taking advantage of a COVID year. There's still a class or 2 left that can still do that as well. So it's hard to know the numbers, but in talking to a source pretty tight end here, there is still a very real there. And I wouldn't say still, there is a very real chance that Kansas State signs less than 15 high schoolers.
Yeah, kind of the nature of the beast in the numbers game there. So yeah, I mean, look, and this goes back to like the conversation we were having on the basketball pod that we did recently. Nobody wants to take like the daily L's. That's the problem with like the recruiting rankings, looking at it right now being in the 60s, right? And the momentum that like a Kansas has right now with the prospects that they're landing. It's just differences in how you're putting the classes together as of right now.
Yeah, I haven't mentioned this, and I'm sure this will probably make both your eyes light up here and anyone that's listening. It's kind of wild to consider this an actual real thing, like reality, but there's only one entire scholarship defensive player on the Kansas State roster that has his eligibility expire after this season. Every single defensive player but one can come back.
That is crazy.
Daniel Green. Daniel Green.
Oh, good old Daniel Green, the guy who's been around for 12 years.
He's the only one that has his eligibility expire.
Well, it's a really nice segue, DY, because I know some people were a little perturbed to see that he did not make the preseason All-Big 12 football team, which is out now. K-State had 5 players represented on the first team, we only get 1 team, this All-Big 12 team. 5 players represented here, which did tie a league high. I know there was some consternation when I put it out that way on Twitter. Like, Texas has 5 players that were honored on the offense and defense. Another one, Jalen Ford, won Defensive Player of the Year. So they theoretically have 6 honors there, but it was just 5 players honored. K-State got Trayshawn Ward as Newcomer of the Year, and then 4 guys on the All-Big 12 teams. So if you technically frame it as 5 players honored, it does tie a league high. And last year, K-State had the most of anybody with 6, I believe it was, on the preseason All-Big 12 football team. So there's a lot of respect here, honestly, for K-State is what I'm saying. Ben Sinnott listed as a fullback, which is interesting. I can understand people. I saw some of the debate going on about that. Like, hey, make Ben Sinnott be a tight end. I was like, fair enough. That's a way to kind of squeeze in an honor for him. But he's deserving of it. I think he's going to be an absolute stud this year. Anyway, he's listed as your first team fullback. Cooper Beebe, first team on the offensive line, although not unanimous, which is wild. Phillip Brooks is your first team return man, kick returner, punt returner. And then on defense, Kobe Savage, coming off the injury, he is listed as an All-Big 12 defensive back. And I mentioned Trayshawn Ward. Running back coming in from Florida State is the Newcomer of the Year, which I'll be honest, that did surprise me. I think he's going to be phenomenal. I think he will be great, but I did not realize that he would garner that much respect and attention across the league as soon as he did with that pick.
Yeah, I would say I have 4 surprises. Yeah, one being that Trayshawn Ward was the Newcomer of the Year. Not that I don't think he'll be a valuable player for Kansas State, but I just think I didn't necessarily think that he would command that kind of respect so early on before the season. Especially not that I think that he should get it over Trayshawn Ward, but there's like a quarterback newcomer, right? There's Alan Bowman at Oklahoma State, although he's been in the Big 12. So how much of a newcomer is he really? That was probably part of the discussion there. Jalen Daniels getting the quarterback honors on the All Big 12 team. That surprised me. I don't think he's really deserving of that. I didn't think he was deserving of second team All Big 12 last year when he got that. So that Cooper Beebe not being a unanimous pick, that's a stunner. You alluded to that. Whoever did not vote Cooper Beebe on the All Big 12 team should probably have their voting privileges revoked at this point, because that's pretty bad. And the same would apply. And I'll defend Texas fans who are throwing the same fit, and that's true, is how does Jalen Ford, defensive lineman, not also become a unanimous pick? How informed are you on the Big 12 if you don't actually pick Jalen Ford or Cooper Beebe?
Yeah. And I'm not going to I would imagine that it was just some sort of oversight or maybe someone new to the league. And a part of this, DY, is why I always sometimes people get frustrated with me. I'm like, look, I never fill the thing out because I'm always like, I don't feel like I'm prepared enough to do it. I will omit somebody and leave somebody off stupidly like that, and then I'll get crushed for it. I'm always afraid, I'm just like, if I don't feel like I'm going to put the work in and know that I've got too much going on to do that, I'm not going to fill this thing out and feel like I'm, half-assing it. And it appears that is what happened here to somebody. But Cole, your thoughts on K-State's all Big 12 selections here? I understand some of DY's gripes, but I would also say, big picture, I was sort of pleasantly surprised at the respect given.
Yeah, I mean, I don't take a lot of gripes with it other than Jalen Daniels, who we can get into in a little bit. I mean, that's a shock to me. Don't understand that one really at all. But other than that, I mean, when you look at K-State's perspective, Cooper Beebe, first team All Big 12, I think you could certainly make an argument for him to be the Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year. He's the best offensive lineman in the Big 12. He's an All-American type. You could make a case for that, even though you never see offensive linemen typically named Offensive Player of the Year, or in that case. So I would make an argument there. Not unanimous is laughable in itself. Trayshawn Ward, a bit of a surprise, but I mean, look, Trayshawn Ward has a lot of respect for what he did at Florida State. He averaged over 6 yards per carry, over 1,100 yards in his 2 years as a Seminole, and last year over 600 yards in itself, while around 7 yards per carry. So Trayshawn Ward is arguably one of the top 2 or 3 transfer running backs in the entire portal that entered, and K-State landed him. And I think a lot of the trust also in that is K-State's offensive line returning, the scheme that they run up front at K-State. I think that plays a factor in Trayshawn Ward being newcomer of the year, a talented guy running behind an experienced offensive line with a really good quarterback that's going to command respect and give you a balanced look up front with what he can do with the ball, Will Howard. So no disagreements with that. I think you could make a case that Daniel Green should be a first team All Big 12 type at linebacker, but I get it. He didn't have the season that he hoped to have last year at the position due to injuries largely. But he was first team preseason All Big 12 going into last season. And I certainly think with health on his side, he will be a first team All Big 12 type this year.
Well, get to your Jalen Daniels point here, Cole, because I know I've discussed this before. You guys saw me lay it out on Twitter with some stats that Cole provided me, so I'm sure he's got some good stuff here. But I mean, if we're talking about Big 12 play, Will Howard was a better QB, man. Will Howard was moving that K-State offense was more efficient offense. And my take on Jalen Daniels always has been, I think he's a really good quarterback. I just think the star there is Andy Kotelnicki, who's the offensive coordinator at Kansas. I mean, he made Jason Bean look like a good quarterback for a large stretch of the season there, and a very productive quarterback. I mean, no offense to Jason Bean, but that's a hell of an accomplishment. I think he's a stud. I think it was a lot of scheme-based stuff for Kansas. Daniels came back down to earth even when he was back healthy and playing in Big 12 play last year. Really ate against bad defenses at the beginning of the season. I think he's going to have a great year. I think the Kansas offense is going to score, and they're going to put up a bunch of points. So I understand the logic there in why he is there. And you throw in that people just love the story of the Kansas comeback. And it makes sense. It makes sense why he is a popular pick there in a wide open year. I understand it. I'm not totally shocked by it. Maybe a little surprised that it wasn't Quinn Ewers or Xavier Worthy. But I don't know. I don't think it's an outrageous sort of pick or anything.
I wanted to jump in here and give Mike, because I kind of touched on it earlier, and I want to clarify what I said. The fact that he was All Big 12 first, the All Big 12 quarterback, whatever, I wouldn't have done it. But most of the quarterbacks.
Would you have Will, or would you have Quinn Ewers or somebody else?
Dylan Gabriel, I think I would pick. to be honest.
DY, we do not agree.
Dylan Gabriel has done more than Quinn Ewers, so I don't know why you're okay with Quinn Ewers and not Dylan Gabriel personally.
Well, it's just the hype. It's the hype. I'm really saying more like what I expect.
Dylan Gabriel was still solid when he played last year. He's got to stay healthy. I get it. Either way,
solid though.
If you give all Big 12 quarterback to Jalen Daniels, whatever, I wouldn't have done it. But you could pick apart just about every quarterback in the Big 12, probably all of them. Even Will has his warts. So there's not a perfect all Big 12 quarterback to pick. So I'm not going to lose my mind over that. But to give Jalen Daniels Offensive Player of the Year is where I have a huge problem with, because that's a huge leap to make. Now, are you just taking the Big 12 quarterback? Probably. But in no universe should he. I mean, it makes the Big 12 look bad, to be quite honest. Like, your best offensive player is Jalen Daniels.
Yeah. No, I've got a lot of numbers on this, and look, I've kind of stayed out of the Jalen Daniels, Will Howard quarterback debate. I think Jalen Daniels is a good quarterback, certainly. So don't get me wrong; it's not necessarily a knock on him, but I just think the hype has gotten completely out of hand. And John and DY, you know this last year. I thought the hype was completely out of hand last year when he was doing this, when he was putting up the numbers. Early in the season, he was putting it up against the likes of Houston, which was 107th in the country in points per drive on the defensive side of the football, West Virginia, which was 119th in points per drive, and then Tennessee Tech, an FCS team to open the season. And I kept saying, wait until he really goes up against Big 12 teams, quality defenses, and also plays against teams that have had the opportunity to adjust to the offensive scheme that KU had put on the table. And lo and behold, that's exactly what happened. Now, I know he got injured, so maybe that's an unfair presentation because, that back half of the season, the last couple of games against Texas and KU, maybe he was knocking some rust off. But even if you look at that Arkansas game, and I know the offensive numbers turn out to look gaudy because of all the overtimes and everything in the late situations, but he didn't look sharp against a really bad Arkansas defense that was 92nd in the country in points per drive and missing their top 3 defensive players, including a top 2-round pick that opted out of the bowl game at the linebacker position for the Hogs. So, they had 23 points in that bowl game with 3 minutes left, and they were about to run out the clock, and then there was a bad call and a fumble, and KU then made their run and came back. Credit to Jalen Daniels. He made some terrific plays there. But if you just look at Big 12 play only, it's not even close. Like, if I'm making an argument for Will Howard versus Jalen Daniels per se, it's not close. Guys, just look at these numbers, for example. So in the last 4 games that Jalen Daniels played in, these are all Big 12 games. And this includes the injury. So against TCU, he was on the field for 5 drives before he got injured in that game. But they'd only scored 3 points before he left the game with that injury. And then you'll recall Jason Bean came in and lit up the Horned Frogs while Jalen Daniels had been struggling against him. He struggled against Iowa State. He struggled against Texas, and he was pretty mediocre against K-State in those games. And those 4 games, Jalen Daniels, 49 of 82 passing, 60%. That's fine. 580 yards passing, 7 yards per pass attempt. All right, you want to add the West Virginia game in, so we're looking at apples to apples of West Virginia. So we're looking at all Big 12 games that Jalen Daniels played on the season. The numbers go to 67 of 111 passing, 60%, 799 yards, 7.2 yards per pass attempt. I mentioned those last 4 games. KU scored 44 points on 33 offensive drives that Jalen Daniels was on the field. That's 1.3 points per drive. That's in non-garbage time. So I'm taking garbage time out. 44 points on 33 drives. 1.3 points per drive. You know what the number 119 offense in the country had last year, guys? That was Virginia Tech. They averaged 1.35 points per drive. 130 FBS teams. 1.3 would rank them 120th in the country last year in those last 4 Big 12 games. You want to add in West Virginia, the numbers go to 92 points on 43 drives. That's right around 2 points per drive. All right, let's look at Will Howard, for example. Will Howard in all Big 12 games. This is excluding Alabama in the bowl game. So for consistency, we're looking at Big 12 games only. There's 6 games. I'm including the Big 12 championship against TCU. So 6 games. Will Howard, 101 out of 164. Passing, 62%. 1,423 yards. 8.7 yards per pass attempt. Remember, Jalen Daniels, 7.2 yards per pass in all of his Big 12 games. So a gigantic, drastic difference there. 59 drives, non-garbage time drives, 214 points, 3.63 points per drive. 3.63 points per drive to right around 2 points per drive for Jalen Daniels in all the Big 12 games that were played last year. For reference, Ohio State was number 4 offense in the country at 3.64 points per drive. K-State with Will Howard put up numbers that would have ranked 5th in the country in points per drive last year when he was on the field. So that gives you an example of how good Will Howard was. You want to look at touchdown to interception numbers at throwing the football. In those 5 Big 12 games Jalen Daniels played, 5 passing touchdowns, 2 interceptions, or excuse me, 1 interception, 5 passing touchdowns, 1 interception. Will Howard, 15 touchdowns, throwing the ball to 2 interceptions. I mean, the numbers just, they're really not close. And so I just really struggle with the Jalen Daniels hype. Now, I said before, like, Will Howard played some defenses that were weaker than who Jalen Daniels had to play against. Jalen Daniels had to play against Iowa State and Texas. Will Howard didn't play in those games, so I think that hurts a little. Jalen Daniels obviously did some things with his legs, although after the injury, he ran the ball in Big 12 play in those last 4 games, 25 carries for 78 yards, which was around 3 yards per carry. So even that, the numbers weren't there rushing the football.
It's a pretty compelling case. I recognize some of those numbers from that tweet that you had me dial up there a little while back. So, yeah, I mean, I guess my only counter to it is that, or it's not even really a counter, but I kind of like Will Howard with a chip on his shoulder, and I kind of like Jalen Daniels bearing the weight of the expectations of being the preseason offensive player of the year in the Big 12, right? I mean, isn't there an element of K-State liking that, digging that, taking that angle on it?
Yeah, no, I certainly think so, John. And there's going to be a lot of pressure on Jalen Daniels. Like, he's going to be, when we're in Big 12 media days next week, he's going to be a focal point. It's going to be a lot different. And opposing teams, and I think Koltnick is a terrific offensive coordinator, but teams have now had a year to really adjust schematically to what they put on the field. And I think they caught some teams a little bit by surprise last season with what they were able to do. Well, I think it's going to be a little bit different as they move into this year. I'm sure they'll find adjustments and still have a solid offense, but there's going to be some different pressures there. And just to hammer home my point, guys, like John, you mentioned it earlier, DY, Jason Bean, you could argue, put up better numbers than Jalen Daniels last year when he took over.
Definitely against TCU.
Well, you look at the numbers for Jason Bean, he averaged 9.4 yards per pass. Jalen Daniels averaged 8.8. They each only had 4 interceptions. Jason Bean had 14 TD passes. Jalen Daniels had 18. And rushing the football, Jason Bean had a higher yards per carry average than Jalen Daniels. I mean, I'm not saying Jason Bean, everybody remembers the play in the bowl game against Arkansas in the Liberty Bowl when he came in and threw that ball away. I'm not saying Jason Bean is better than Daniels, but the numbers he put up kind of indicate that this is more of a schematic thing to me than it is necessarily the talent of the QB. And again, I think Jalen Daniels has some talent. I just think we're getting a little out of control here if we think he's the Big 12 player of the year.
Which by the way, is a case that would be worse for us as K-State fans than it is the scheme. Like, that's the other thing that I think always gets a little bit twisted. Like, I'm basically arguing against my own self-interest and saying I believe it's more the scheme than anything else, but that is what I truly believe there at Kansas. Quick question before we go, DY. Who would be the first to get a head coaching offer, Colin Klein or Kotelnicki?
I don't know enough about Kotelnicki. I mean, how long is he? Am
I saying it wrong? I thought it was Kotelnicki. Is it not Kotelnicki?
Kotelnicki, whatever it is. But like, how long has he been coaching? I don't know much about him.
Well, I know he got a massive raise. Colin Klein and he both got huge raises this offseason. He had been with I believe he's been with Leipold like for the long haul at Buffalo.
Man, probably him. I mean, but I guess I wish I knew this. Like, we know Colin Klein just got courted by Notre Dame, and it was his job if he wanted it. Like, is Kotelnicki getting that kind of traction? I'm not sure. He got a raise for a reason, not just because he was good, but probably because there were some prying hands there as well.
Yeah. But it'll be interesting to monitor. I mean, look, the bottom line is, like, Kansas, you said it, DY, as long as Leipold's there, Kansas is not going to be a bottom dweller. Like, it's going to be a battle. And, like, I just think of, like, all the conversations we've had today in recording a basketball pod and a football pod. Like, the terminally online nature of all of us and Twitter and fighting and like everybody winning and losing every single day. Like it's with the way K-State basketball is going and the way both football programs are going. And obviously what Kansas basketball is like, man, it's just going to be a war. You're going to have to stomach some wins and losses both on and off the field. And
yeah, I'm not forecasting this, but it's just something that I think Kansas State fans are struggling with. This isn't the Kansas of 2015, right? With Lance Leipold that's going on. The odds are not in Kansas State's favor to continue this streak as much as they have. They've won 13 straight against KU.
15, right?
15, whatever it is. The gap is not as wide as what some just assume. I think some are assuming Kansas is just going to be dreadful until 2094. Like, that's not the case. Like, defeating Kansas is going to be tough to do. It's going to be tough this year.
You guys are both wrong. It's 14 straight.
Oh, sorry. I might have added one already.
So the last one was 07, 08?
08.
Yeah. Like,
08.
Those games are going to soon, because Kansas they're going to want that game more than any other game.
They sure are. Let's see if the Blue Wings are rising out of the booth coming up this year.
Oh, that's it. Oh, it's in Lawrence this year. You're right.
It is. Yeah.
Oh,
Blue Wings rising, baby.
That place is going to be a nut house, and K-State fans are going to love saying, "Oh, it's your Super Bowl," and KU fans are just they're going to have to take that.
Well, we'll see. We'll see where KU's at that point in the season. I think that's going to be
late, right? It's like the second to last game.
Yeah, it is. So hopefully KU.
Their schedule's tougher this year. I will say that. They feasted on a pretty advantageous beginning last year. Funny thing is, and we're getting in the weeds right now, but an interesting swing game for them actually comes very early. It's when they play Illinois at home on a Friday.
Yeah, they'll definitely have a big crowd for the K-State game there, and I just hope they have enough porta potties on hand to be ready to go for that one.
Listen, it may not be 2015 Kansas football anymore, but it's 2015 with the jokes that we've got, baby.
I'll make sure I bring my waterproof boots for the sewage that leaks over.
Who was the coach in 15? Is that Turner Gill still, or is that
no? That would have been Beatty, right?
I think it was Beatty's first year because Joe Huebner went in there to Lawrence and hung it on David Beatty in his first year.
Oh wow! Yeah. So they were already done with Turner Gill and Charlie Weiss by that point.
That'd be correct.
They were turning them out pretty quick there for a while. Yeah. All right. Shout out to Holiday Distillery. You guys go get your 360 vodka, go get your Ben Holiday bottled and bond bourbon. Stock up on your home field gear. Get this sweet Copper Bowl shirt if you are so inclined to support K-State and support home field, who again helps us out here on the pod. We appreciate all the help that we get from Tucker Franklin behind the scenes as well here today. For Derek Young and Cole Manbeck, I'm John Kurtz. Thanks for listening to another 3 Month.